Imagine a police officer so arrogant she mocks a judge, in open court. But when the gavel drops, her world flips upside down. Stay tuned as we uncover how one bold judge turned the tables and delivered a lesson no badge could protect her from. The gavel cracked like thunder, echoing off the oak-paneled walls and bouncing through the hushed courtroom. "Order in my court!" Judge Marcus Hill's deep voice rolled across the room like a sudden storm front, sharp enough to make even the buzzing fluorescent lights seem to flicker in surprise. Every person in the gallery stiffened. Attorneys froze mid-sentence, pens hovered above notepads, and a nervous cough from the back row died halfway out of someone's throat. Even the bailiff, a broad-shouldered veteran of 100 tense hearings, instinctively straightened to attention. Everyone froze, everyone, that is, except Officer Karen Blake. Karen didn't so much sit as lounge in the witness chair, leaning back until the wood creaked beneath her. One arm draped lazily across the chair's edge, the other resting on her hip, fingers brushing the polished handle of her duty belt. Her smirk widened at the sound of the gavel, a defiant curve that made it clear she considered the judge's command a mild inconvenience rather than an order to be obeyed. A low ripple of murmurs swept through the audience, like a wave breaking against the shore. This was no ordinary traffic court hearing where people came to argue over speeding tickets. This was the trial that had filled every local news segment for the past week, a high-profile investigation into a traffic stop that had sparked protests, heated town hall meetings, and endless online debates. Reporters perched in the back rows with cameras ready, their lenses glinting like watchful eyes. Every seat was taken, latecomers lined the walls. But Karen Blake, the woman at the center of it all, looked as if she were lounging in her own living room. She tilted her head slightly, letting a strand of blonde hair fall perfectly across her uniform collar, the gleam of her badge catching the light with every subtle movement. Her posture screamed confidence, no, it screamed defiance. The slightest shift of her boot against the polished courtroom floor sounded deliberate, almost taunting. Judge Hill's dark eyes narrowed, but his expression remained measured. He was a man known for patience, for the calm authority that could quiet a room without raising his voice. Yet the tension in his jaw betrayed the effort it took to maintain that calm now. He had presided over murder trials, corporate scandals, and citywide corruption cases, but rarely had he encountered a witness, especially a law enforcement officer, who seemed so openly dismissive of the court's authority. "Officer Blake," he said, voice even but edged with steel, "this courtroom demands respect." "I will not repeat myself." Karen's smirk barely twitched. She adjusted her seat, the creak of the chair loud in the expectant silence, and casually crossed one leg over the other. The movement was almost theatrical, as though she knew every camera in the room was focused on her. Her eyes swept the gallery with a look that hovered between boredom and amusement. It was the kind of glance that made people shift in their seats, unsure whether to feel annoyed, impressed, or afraid. Behind her, a man in a gray suit whispered to his neighbor, "Is she trying to get herself in trouble?" The neighbor, a middle-aged woman clutching her handbag, gave a barely audible reply, "Looks like she thinks she's above it all." And maybe she did. For Karen, authority was something she wore like her badge, something that belonged to her, something she could flaunt. She had walked into the courthouse earlier with a stride that dared anyone to challenge her. From the moment she took the stand, she'd answered questions with clipped sentences and an icy smile, interrupting attorneys when she felt like it, as if cross-examination were a game she'd already won. The gavel strike had been meant to break the spell, to remind everyone that the courtroom was Judge Hill's domain. But as the echo faded and the silence stretched thin, it became clear, Karen Blake was not impressed. Somewhere in the back row, a camera clicked, capturing the defiant officer and the unflinching judge in the same frame, a perfect snapshot of the storm that was only just beginning. Karen Blake's reputation reached the courthouse long before she stepped through its heavy oak doors. Within the department she was known as Bulletproof Blake, not because of her vest, but because she acted as if nothing and no one could touch her. Complaints from citizens never seemed to stick. Supervisors grumbled about her attitude, but her arrest numbers were high, her reports immaculate, and she had friends in the right places. Karen believed those facts made her untouchable. That morning, she arrived at the courthouse like it was her personal stage. Reporters waiting on the steps called her name as flashes popped in the cool air. Karen tilted her chin just enough to give the cameras a confident half-smile, the kind that said, "I'm in charge here." A few bystanders booed. She didn't even blink. Inside, the air smelled faintly of polished wood and paper. The murmur of the gathered crowd hushed as her boots clicked against the marble floor. She wore her uniform like a trophy, perfectly pressed shirt, gleaming badge, radio clipped with military precision. Even the black leather of her belt seemed to shine brighter than everyone else's shoes. Every step announced, "I'm the authority." From the moment she entered the courtroom, Karen commanded attention. She didn't wait for the bailiff's direction but strode straight to the witness stand, her eyes scanning the room like a hawk sizing up prey. When she sat, she leaned back casually, legs planted wide, elbows propped on the armrests. It was the posture of someone who believed the rules were meant for others. As the questioning began, her confidence bordered on arrogance. When the prosecuting attorney asked a simple opening question, Karen answered with a smirk and a shrug, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Depends on what you mean by routine stop, counselor," she said, stressing counselor like an inside joke. A few spectators exchanged uneasy glances. She interrupted follow-up questions, finishing sentences for the attorneys, as if she were the one running the show. When the defense objected to one of her drawn-out comments, she laughed, a bright, sharp sound that echoed off the courtroom walls. Judge Hill raised an eyebrow but said nothing at first, watching carefully like a chess player waiting for the right move. Karen thrived on that silence. In her mind, the absence of an immediate reprimand meant victory. To her, the courtroom wasn't a solemn place of justice, it was an arena, and she was the main event. She even rolled her eyes at the stenographer when asked to repeat a statement. "You heard me the first time," she said lightly, as if the entire court were an inconvenience to her day. The stenographer stiffened but continued typing. Behind the bar, reporters scribbled furiously. The audience shifted in their seats, the tension growing thicker with each dismissive remark. Even fellow officers sitting in support seemed uneasy, their eyes darting between Karen and the judge. Judge Hill finally leaned forward, voice calm but edged with quiet authority. "Officer Blake," he said evenly, "you will answer the questions asked and you will do so respectfully. This is a court of law, not a stage for commentary." Karen tilted her head, a slow, deliberate motion, and gave a half-smile that bordered on mockery. "Understood, Your Honor," she replied, the words polite but her tone anything but. A ripple of murmurs swept the gallery. It wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it, as though every syllable dared the judge to push back. Judge Hill's eyes narrowed slightly, but he remained composed. He had seen arrogance before, but this was different. Karen wasn't merely confident, she was challenging the very authority of the court. For Karen, this performance wasn't about truth or justice. It was about control. And for the moment, she believed she had it. The courtroom lights dimmed slightly as the bailiff wheeled in a portable screen. All chatter stopped. "Your Honor," the prosecutor said, rising from his seat, "the state would like to enter Exhibit B into evidence, body camera footage from Officer Blake's patrol unit the night of the incident." Judge Hill gave a single nod. "Proceed." A soft electronic beep filled the silence, and the first frame flickered onto the screen. The timestamp glowed in the corner, 11:47 p.m. Rain streaked across the camera lens, illuminated by flashing blue lights. A tense hush settled over the room as everyone leaned forward. The video began with Karen's patrol car pulling up behind a dented sedan on a quiet street. The young driver, later identified as 22-year-old Darius Cole, stepped out with his hands raised. His voice, shaky but respectful, carried through the speaker system, "Evening, officer. Is there a problem?" From the footage, Karen's reply was sharp and impatient. "Get back in the car. Now." The audience in the courtroom shifted uneasily. Her tone was unmistakably hostile, nothing like the calm professionalism expected from a trained officer. The video continued. Darius explained that his tail light had gone out on his way home from work and that he hadn't realized it. He offered his license and registration with a trembling hand. Karen's voice dripped with sarcasm. "Oh, sure you didn't know. How convenient." A ripple of murmurs moved through the gallery. Even those who had entered the courtroom skeptical of the charges now stared at the screen, eyebrows raised. On the witness stand, Karen sat motionless, arms folded, her eyes fixed on the far wall instead of the screen. The confident smirk she had worn earlier seemed a little tighter now. The footage grew more uncomfortable. Karen mocked Darius's nervousness, telling him, "What's the matter? Cat got your tongue?" She threatened to tow his vehicle and hinted at searching it for anything suspicious, though the stop was for a simple equipment violation. Gasps escaped from the audience. A woman in the second row whispered, "That's harassment." The prosecutor paused the video and turned toward Karen. "Officer Blake," he said carefully, "do you dispute that this is your voice?" Karen gave a small shrug, eyes finally flicking toward the screen. "That's my voice," she admitted, "but you have to understand the context." "Context?" the prosecutor pressed. "Please explain what context requires an officer to mock a citizen who is complying fully with instructions." Karen leaned back, lips tightening. "People exaggerate. He wasn't scared. He was fine." A murmur of disbelief swept across the courtroom. Even the defense attorney lowered his gaze, adjusting his tie as though wishing he were anywhere else. The prosecutor restarted the video. The next minutes showed Darius standing in the rain as Karen rifled through his car without a warrant. His voice cracked as he asked, "Am I free to go, ma'am?" Karen replied with a laugh. "You'll leave when I say you can." The screen froze on Karen's face, illuminated by the red and blue lights, her expression unmistakably smug. Judge Hill leaned forward, his hands folded, eyes locked on the frozen image. "Officer Blake," he said, his voice calm but heavy with authority, "do you still find this situation amusing?" The room went silent. You could almost hear hearts beating. Karen hesitated for the first time that day. "I did what I thought was necessary," she said finally, though the confidence in her voice wavered. The judge's gaze did not soften. Around the room, reporters scribbled furiously, their pens scratching like tiny hammers. Everyone present knew what they had just witnessed, not just a simple traffic stop, but a clear abuse of power. And the trial had only just reached its turning point. Hours of testimony followed the video. Lawyers traded arguments, each side trying to steer the narrative, but everyone in the room sensed the momentum had shifted. What began as a routine hearing had turned into a public reckoning. Judge Marcus Hill listened patiently, his expression unreadable. He took careful notes, occasionally glancing at Karen Blake, who now sat noticeably straighter in the witness chair. The earlier swagger had drained from her shoulders, replaced by a restless tension. She tapped her finger against the armrest in tiny, nervous beats, an involuntary drumroll leading to the inevitable. When the final attorney finished speaking, a heavy silence settled over the courtroom. Even the air seemed thicker, as if holding its breath. Judge Hill removed his glasses, polished them slowly with a handkerchief, and looked out over the gallery. His gaze moved deliberately from the attorneys to the press row and finally to Karen. "Officer Blake," he began, his voice steady and resonant, "this court has heard the testimony, reviewed the evidence, and witnessed your conduct, both on the night in question and here today. Every eye followed him. The only sound was the faint buzz of a ceiling light. You were entrusted with a badge and the authority that comes with it," he continued. "That authority is not a shield for arrogance, nor is it a license to humiliate those you serve. It is a duty to uphold the law with integrity and humility." Karen swallowed hard. Her hands, once confidently folded, now tightened around the edges of the witness stand. Judge Hill's tone sharpened. "Instead, you mocked a citizen, ignored procedure, and treated this courtroom as though it were beneath you. Such behavior erodes the very trust that law enforcement depends upon." A reporter's camera clicked. The sound felt as loud as a gunshot in the hush. "For these reasons," the judge said, pausing just long enough for the weight of his words to settle, "I am ordering the immediate suspension of Officer Karen Blake without pay pending a full departmental investigation. Furthermore, you will complete 100 hours of community service and attend mandatory de-escalation and civil rights training." A ripple of gasps moved through the gallery. Karen's eyes widened, but she said nothing. This ruling, Judge Hill added, will be entered into the public record. Let it be clear that no one, regardless of uniform or title, stands above the law. He raised the gavel. This court is adjourned. The wooden strike echoed like a final verdict on arrogance itself. Reporters leapt to their feet, scribbling furiously. Karen sat frozen for a moment, her once defiant smirk erased, before the bailiff gently signaled for her to step down. The turning point had arrived, not just for Karen Blake, but for everyone who believed power could replace accountability. Outside the courthouse, the late afternoon sun flashed against a wall of camera lenses. Microphones shot forward like spears as reporters shouted over one another. Officer Blake, any comment on the judge's ruling? Do you plan to appeal the suspension? Karen Blake, once the picture of swagger, kept her eyes on the steps beneath her feet. The shine of her polished boots no longer felt like armor. The same uniform that had turned heads that morning now seemed to weigh 100 pounds. She offered no quotes, no witty retorts, only a quiet, almost startled glance at the crowd before her attorney guided her to a waiting car. Judge Hill emerged moments later. Unlike the rush of cameras that had greeted Karen, the crowd parted respectfully for him. A few citizens applauded. One elderly woman reached out to shake his hand. "Thank you for standing up for what's right," she said. The judge simply nodded, offering a modest smile before disappearing into the city traffic. Days turned into weeks, and the consequences of that afternoon unfolded steadily. Karen's suspension became headline news. The department announced an internal review and released a statement acknowledging the importance of rebuilding public trust. Neighbors who once waved casually now kept their distance when Karen walked her dog. The badge that once drew admiration now drew hard stares. When her community service assignment began, Karen reported to a neighborhood cleanup project not far from where the traffic stop had taken place. The bright orange vest she was issued felt worlds away from the crisp blue uniform she usually wore. Each morning she joined a small crew of volunteers picking up litter along sidewalks and painting over graffiti. Residents recognized her instantly. Some ignored her. Others offered polite nods but little else. A few approached with cautious curiosity. "You're the officer from the video, right?" a teenage boy asked one afternoon, holding a garbage bag. Karen hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah. That's me." He studied her for a moment. "At least you're out here helping now." That simple remark landed harder than any courtroom sentence. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a start. Over the weeks, the experience chipped away at Karen's old bravado. She began to listen more than she spoke, hearing stories from residents about their daily struggles and their hopes for safer, fairer policing. Each conversation reminded her that authority meant service, not superiority. Months later, in a rare interview with a local paper, Karen admitted, "I thought the badge made me untouchable. I was wrong. That judge gave me the wake-up call I didn't know I needed." Judge Hill never commented publicly on the case again. For him, justice was never about headlines, it was about restoring balance. And for the community, the message was clear: respect is earned through actions, not demanded through power. What a showdown! Justice proved that no one stands above the law. What do you think? Was the verdict fair? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you enjoyed this story, hit that like button, subscribe, and tap the bell icon so you never miss another powerful true-to-life story.